So I don't have a conversation recording available to you this week, so I thought I would just record some thoughts, things that I've been thinking about in the last several days, and an experience I had this morning. I thought I would share that with you in lieu of a conversation. I'll be recording another conversation later this week, and so I should be able to release that next week. So look forward to that. But for today, uh, there's been a few topics that have been crossing my mind, and I just wanted to explore those a little bit with you. And this all has to do with a struggle that I've been in, a spiritual struggle that I've been in, where I've been really wrestling with kind of a recurring toxic God image and um, disappointments about my life and the way things have turned out in my life, where things that I wanted or hoped for didn't come to be. And and I struggled with that, and I've struggled because I've had this sense that I've worked so hard my whole life. I've changed so much, and I've healed so much, and I've grown so much. And there's always been this, unfortunately, this expectation of some kind of payoff at the end of that. Like, don't we get somewhere in this journey? Don't we come to a place where we feel um, more peace, or have the joy we're looking for, or have the relationships that we want, or have the job that we want, or have the abundance that we seek? And I've just been in this struggle. This channel is on the sacred everywhere, and I do believe. I mean, I know in my head, and I think about so much theologically of how we can understand the sacred is everywhere, of how we can understand our own lives as sacred and ourselves as sacred. And and yet it's also true that sometimes that doesn't trickle down into my own heart. And so I do struggle, like all of us. I struggle with this journey. And so I was kind of in the heat of this the other day. And over the course of the last several days, there's been some really interesting videos that have crossed my feed that have been super helpful to me. So, first, there was an interview with a woman who was a Hindu priest, and she talked about experiencing the self that does not suffer. And I'm like, wow, I don't know that I've ever experienced that self. Then I was listening to a video with Father Thomas Keating, who's passed away. Thomas Keating was one of the founders of the centering prayer movement and the contemplative movement in the Christian tradition that really emerged in the 1960s, even though there's long roots in contemplative practice and spirituality. But there was kind of a new rediscovery of that in the 1960s. And so he was talking about because a big part of my struggle was that I was feeling that I couldn't feel God's presence. I couldn't feel the sacred. I couldn't feel that sense of being loved and held that I so desperately wanted to feel. And so Keating was talking about that in the Christian tradition, if we think about Jesus as taking on all the consequences of sin and human frailty, that when it's said in, we say in the Apostles' Creed, but in elsewhere as well, that after he was crucified and died, we say Christ descended into hell. And Thomas Keating talked about that another way to understand that is that the descent into hell means that Christ entered into the psychological state of utter alienation and abandonment by God. And of course, we know from the gospel narratives, it's said that on the cross, at one point, Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, of course, we don't know if he actually said that, but we can imagine it. We can, of course, imagine. I mean, there he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Again, the narrative tells us praying for his pathway to be taken from him, but then he surrendered to it. And so then he's on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me?" And so Thomas Keating said that we can think about this descent into hell as being entering fully into that state of utter alienation and abandonment. And that it's only in surrendering to that state of the human condition that we experience, not just in, when we think of when we are afraid of death, but we think of it in our daily lives when this comes, that we feel abandoned or alienated from each other or from ourselves or from God. And so he was saying that in this state, Christ entered into that psychological state of abandonment, experienced it fully, and it was only after that that he was raised to new life. And that was really powerful for me. Then I came across another video of Father Thomas, not Thomas, of Father Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan monk and priest and a beautiful writer and amazing thinker in Christianity. And he was talking about the contemplative mind and non-dualism, and that we have this dualistic mind, especially since the Reformation and especially in the West, that wants to separate out, split, obviously mind from body, but also right from wrong, evil from good. There's this either or thinking. Whereas he said the contemplative and mystical mind doesn't have the need to separate the field into opposites, but can hold all of the opposites in one. And so he says that the contemplative mind can can see that the essential core of everything is good. The essential core is sacred. And so when you can see the essential core of everything, no matter how it appears on the surface, no matter how dark it appears, or how frightened it appears, or how rage-filled it appears, or how dangerous it appears, if we can see that the essential core of everything is good and is holy, if we can experience then uh, that we don't have to then separate the field ourselves, that when we can see the woundedness of reality and see God in that woundedness of reality, that we can then hold it all together, that we can hold it together without rejecting any part of it, that we can see God in all things. He said that when we no longer need to eliminate the opposition, that's when we can see God in everything. We don't have to eliminate the opposition, but can just hold it and contain it and recognize it as there, but not have the need to repress it or eliminate it. And because he talks about that everything in real life will disappoint us eventually. There is nothing about life that is completely fair or just. It's just not. And so we have to become able with this through the contemplative mind to hold everything as it is. Not that we don't respond and try to improve or make right or make just or make good what we can affect, but that we just recognize that this is what reality is and not have the expectation that it should be different, that it should be perfect, because it never will be. And God, that is such a hard truth. For those of us especially who grew up in families where we were traumatized or had horrible experiences, where then we interpret that as being about us, and then in order, where we experience the powerlessness of that trauma, where often we can't run and we can't fight. And so we freeze, we collapse because we can't do anything else, and we become completely powerless. And then that becomes wired into our nervous systems. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk is such a perfect book that describes how that works in us. And so I've experienced so much of that where I, when faced with adversity, will just freeze or collapse. Now, I've grown a lot and gained more confidence and more empowerment in my life as an adult, but it still shows up in my nervous system. And that's what's been happening. Like I've been just having these cycles of hopefulness about something and then disappointment and collapse and hope collapse, hope collapse, hope collapse. And over time, all of this stress of so many factors that we're all holding right now, we are all under so much pressure that our nervous systems just can't take it anymore. And so you know, we can feel all kinds of things about that. But it's a struggle to accept that reality isn't going to give us all the outcomes we desire, no matter how hard we work, no matter how much we push ourselves, no matter how much we heal. And so there's this transactional side of us. I mean, I'm speaking for myself myself here. I'm not trying to speak for everybody, but I know it's not just me that feels this this sense of I was the good girl. I did what I was supposed to do. I followed the rules. Now, maybe you were the kind of person like other people I know who didn't follow any of the rules and who, lived the wild life. I never did that. I really never did that. And so I'm kind of living more of a wild life now that I'm older. But anyway, there's just this sense that but it's in the contemplative mind. That's the point here. It's in the contemplative mind where we can hold what's happening and what's real and not have to force it to meet our expectations or to have this transactional belief that just because we are doing what we should be doing or healing or smart enough or bright enough or capable enough or dancing fast enough that life will then respond proportionally to that. Now, I'm not saying it never does. I'm not saying that we can't dream and bring into being real goodness and real things like love and abundance and joy and peace. We do have that capacity. But I know in my own life, it's just felt like there just hasn't been nearly enough of that. And so, there's just this absurdity in the world, this absurdity of unjust suffering. And that's a hard pill to swallow. That's a hard pill to swallow. And I've struggled my whole life with that pill, that truth. And so, um, I've been journaling a lot. I've been uh, trying to take time in silence. Now, I will say too, I've never been a good meditator. I've never really developed a good, solid meditation practice. That monkey mind, goes a little insane all the time in me. My brain's always cranking out and thinking and overdrive. But I have been trying more and more over the last year or so to take time in the morning and sometimes I just listen to meditative music. Um, Sometimes I do sit in silence. But I've never really been good at the kind of meditation practice, at least is how I think it should be, where there's a sense of finding that stillness and actually coming to maybe a place of quiet in the mind. I don't typically get there. But this morning, so again, another video came into my feed about Jim Carrey and talking about his experiences of awakening. And it was a beautiful video about him. And so what I did then sit in silence this morning for about 30 minutes in a period of true silence. I wasn't listening to music. Um, what, and of course, I've read enough books about the now and the power of now, and the not being embroiled in thoughts of the past or the future, that the sacred is in the now. And I love thinking about, in the book of Genesis, when Moses is at the burning bush and God speaks to him and he asks for God's name, God says, I am who I am. Another way that's been translated is I will be who I will be. There's this sense that in this I amness is the present moment. And so in this time of silence this morning, I was sitting there and I was just thinking about what is happening now. And so I was just observing as I'm sitting. I was observing maybe where I was anxious in my body. And then I was just saying, Anxiety is happening now," or pain is happening now in my neck," or something like that. And as I was doing that and just noticing, like, bird song is happening now. As I was just noticing that, what finally occurred to me is that this is where God is in this now. In this now is the fullness of time. In this now is the expansiveness. There's a sense, in the Greek language, there's two ways of talking about time: chronos and kairos. And that's kairos is a word that's also used in the New Testament. Chronos time is chronological time, clock time as we know it. But kairos time is the fullness of time. It's the completeness of time. It's the wholeness of time. And that, to me, I'm seeing now, is the it's the incarnation of the divine into the moment, is in the now, is in this now. And that was very, very powerful for me to just sit in that moment of now and just observing what is happening now, what is happening here, without labeling it, without identifying with it, without saying, I'm anxious, but just saying, anxiety is happening now. It's like I remember in a centering prayer workshop, the sense of being floating on a river in a boat, and that sometimes things like things go by in the water, and we can just allow them to go by. We don't have to get identified with them. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you today. A little bit about the struggle I've been in, a little bit about what's come across my feed in my life that I think has been little graces through YouTube. And I just wanted to share that. So I hope that you can also maybe find a little bit of that fullness of time in what is happening right now. Thanks. Thanks for being part of this journey. If these conversations matter to you, your membership helps make them possible. Until next time, may you notice the sacred